Let us start the parallel session 1-3 network multiple local eco-museums around DMZ on the angle of planning. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Cha Xiyun, DMZ of this session. In this session, we will take a look at the concept of eco-museum and how to apply this concept to the DMZ area. Let me introduce today's presenters as well as the panelists. The session will be chaired by Ms. In Young-jang, the chairperson of ICOM Korea. The first presentation will be delivered by Raul Dal Santo, coordinator of Paravayu Eco Museum. And the second presentation will be delivered by Mr. Sun Ju Hwang, the team leader of Regional Culture Team of Gyeonggi Cultural Foundation. And the first panelist is Mr. Seok Hyun-dok, Senior Director of Korea Rural Economic Institute. And the last panelist is Yeon-hak Chung, Senior Curator of the National Folk Museum of Korea. Now I'd like to invite Ms. In Young-jang, the chair of this session. Please welcome her with a big hand. Thank you very much. I'm very honored and privileged to chair this session on the DMZ, especially the networking multiple local eco-museums around DMZ on the angle of planning. Here we'd like to apply the concept of eco-museum in order to further develop the DMZ for the inter-Korean relations. In this session, we would like to highlight the concept of eco-museum. The concept was created several decades ago. For the past 50 years or so since the creation of this concept, we have seen the development of eco-museum, community museum, and various other types of museums. And the first presenter is the one who has led the eco-museum movement in Italy as well as in Europe. So we will listen to his presentation, and then the second presenter will touch upon the approach taken by Gyeonggi Province to the creation of eco-museum. Gyeonggi Province has been quite active in creating an eco-museum for the past 5 years or so. I believe that this is really a valuable concept, so this is where we have to put our focus on. So after two presentations, we'd like to invite two panelists to delve into this concept of eco-museum. Due to time constraints, I don't think we would have time to delve into this concept, but I'd like to ask you to be with us till the end of this session. Then I'd like to turn to Mr. Dal Santo for his presentation.
Thank you, and good morning. Since here in Italy is early morning, I will talk about dreams. I would like to talk about dreams, the needed changes to make dreams real, and the eco-museum as a tool to empower communities to change reality. I'll try to explain also how museums link local and global sustainability. Eco-museums are spread all over the world, but I'll talk about Italian eco-museum that I know better. So let's start. Everyone asks, when I was a young ecologist, I wished a better environment because of the industrialization. The place where I lived, near Milan, was characterized by the pollution of air, water, and soil. There are also community dreams and national dreams. Many Italian dreams became law when the Republic Constitution was approved in 1947. The Constitution itself is a dream to achieve every day. Italian ecomuseum are tools to realize some of the Constitution dreams. And we can explain what is an ecomuseum in Italy through the Italian Constitution dreams. A practice of active citizenship aimed to the taking care of landscape and heritage, to contributing to the material and spiritual progress of society and the full development of the human person. How can we make dreams real and inspire future? We need the permanent changes of the present. Ecomuseums can inspire people to address their needs for change. To make or inspire changes, dreams have to be followed by action, in presence of a breeding ground. According to Hugues de Varine, the living heritage is the humus, the breeding ground, the root of the future. Everybody take charge of heritage through a process of governance. Participation processes can release energy and build a community for cultural, social, and economic change and sustainable local development. Therefore, both a breeding ground, the cultural heritage, and a voluntary process of governance, the participation, are needed to make permanent change of the present, inspire future, make dreams. But what kind of participation? We should go up on the stairs of participation to the people empowerment. That is, make people able to carry out projects for the common interest. When you go up the participation scale, the staircase became more and more masterable. This is the reason why we should make the step bigger by involving the interested stakeholders. Obtained results be read in relation to the changes that we produced or triggered within the community. First of all, methodological changes concerning the way work is done. Then, cultural changes, in particular linked to the relational and social dimension. And finally, physical changes, the increasing quality of landscape and environment. In the last year, and also this year because of the pandemic, in Italy, we found out about a reduction of private assets. For this reason, we have to better recognize and enhance common goods and heritage. But we have two problems. The first, the community does not often recognize common goods as community heritage. The second, the governance model is often based on the logic of bipolar administration. This is a model of governance with administrators versus administrated. It does not allow the community to mobilize its resources. The community cannot express ideas and implementation and changes for the solution of complex problems. The innovation of tradition and a participation process are needed. In 2014, Italian ecomuseums found a national network and shared a strategic manifesto. This is a documented progress aimed to coordinating and inspiring the work of Italian ecomuseums, defining tools, methods, and specific objectives, the network agenda. Collaborating with ministry, regions, and metropolitan cities to recognize the ecomuseum's role. And finally, monitoring the obtained results and achieved change. I would like that you come to Italy, but for now it's impossible. So let's go in Italy only virtually. We go in Italy to analyze how Italian ecomuseums has tried to address changes in their territories. Let's go. Our Italian trip will have 11 stops to discover 11 ways to inspire future. Let's start with my ecomuseum. We are in the north of Italy, in Lombardy region, the plain. The Landscape Ecomuseum of Parabiago was born to answer to the placelessness syndrome. That is, citizens do not appreciate the small-scale heritage that characterize the city landscape. Near Parabiago, the North Milan urban, this picture shows the Breda bunker that is a site of the ecomuseum. This ecomuseum is a cultural institution managed by an association that involves institutions at different levels. It was recognized by the Lombardy region and it works with the municipalities in the north of Milan. Put landscape at the center. We are now on the Alps in Trentino province with a beautiful landscape. The Ecomuseum of the Giudicaria studies, conserves, enhances, and shows the community heritage, especially the landscape. Plan and act with citizens continuously. The Ecomuseum is a museum of the community. It is legitimated by the participation of citizens. The Ecomuseum of Argento is in Emilia-Romagna region, inside the river Po Plain, the bigger in Italy. This Ecomuseum plans and works not only for, but also with the community. This is in accordance with the logic of active citizenship and the subsidiarity principle. In the center of Italy, the Ecomuseum of Casentino realized the Ecomuseum action plan using a very useful tool, the parish map. The parish map is a participatory mapping of a landscape resulting from a shared reading of the tangible and intangible heritage. They are useful and beautiful. This Ecomuseum also realized the so-called Bank of Memory. It is a website that records traditions and oral and intangible memory. Let's start in northern Italy. All media realized by the Green Eco Museum are published under an open license and are free for sharing and adapting. This Eco Museum, like many other in Italy, shared a lot of media in time of pandemic. Help institution to plan. Now we are in the south of Italy, in Puglia region, with a beautiful rural landscape. Here, ecomuseums realize many parish maps to recognize the heritage and the action about its good use. Puglia region used this work to make the landscape master plan. In Italy, landscape is very important heritage elements. We go in Piemonte region, in the north of Italy, where Ecomuseum of Valle Elboserva realize action for the care, the interpretation, and the good use of landscape. Taking care of the landscape, taking care of the stakeholders network and the large use of the subsidiarity principle are very important for Italian community. This is because thanks to stakeholders, some heritage elements can get new life or new use in order to improve social, environmental, and economic development. What kind of development am I talking about? The Ecomuseum focuses on sustainable development with a holistic vision. I'll show you an example from the Ecomuseum that I managed. The Parabiago Ecomuseum in 2015 empowered many local stakeholders to activate the circular economy of the Parabiago bread. This project was called Cultivate Parabiago by UT. This is the complex scheme of the circular economy of the bread of Parabiago. Don't worry, I'll try to explain it in detail. Loaves are made in local bakeries with the whole wheat flour. They are produced with the sourdough, Parabiago water, and salt. The flour made from soft wheat and of an ancient variety called San Pastore is stone meal in the last water mill in the area. 100 hectares of agriculture fields are cultivated with the conservative agriculture. This agriculture impacts in the minimum manner on the ground. It reduces CO2 emissions, preserves biodiversity, and humus. And provides cover crops after the harvest. The fields are fertilized by the compost produced in local farm from vegetable waste coming from the public and private gardens of Parabiago. Local bakeries sell the bread that is also served in school canteens. The bread of Parabiago was the first of many products with trademark that certify that they are made in Parabiago. The Ecomuseum empowered people to leave agribusiness and start agroecology. Agroecology products are both good food and ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are landscape, biodiversity, oxygen production, climate regulation, recreation and tourism, and so on. Last but not least, strategy of Italian Ecomuseum concerns the link between global and local sustainability. In 2019, Italian Ecomuseum shared a strategic manifesto amendment. This amendment underlines the Italian Ecomuseum are committed to safeguarding, caring for, and enhancing assets, natural, cultural, tangible and intangible heritage. It also stresses the role of Ecomuseum for environmental, social and economic development of community. The achievement of the 2030 United Nations Agenda Goals for Sustainable Development, in particular the climate justice goal. A new economic model is needed to link global and local sustainability. Donat Economics model revolves around an holistic approach to both human and environmental well-being. Italian Ecomuseum global in networking. Since 2016, Italian Ecomuseum are managing for the DROX International Platform. It is a website for exchange and experience sharing. The platform aims at connecting a museum and community museum all over the world. I talked about Italian Museum because I know them better than others. Dreams of their communities needs effort to be realized in the everyday life. So do the Sustainable Development Goals. Changes are needed in the relational, social and physical dimensions to empower community and release energies to achieve these goals. On a local scale, museums all over the world are working hard to make these dreams true. I would like to end with this quote by Helder Camara, a Brazilian bishop. When we are dreaming, it is only a dream. When we are dreaming with others, it is the beginning of a new reality. These dreams dreamed by many museums, communities, people all over the world are becoming fascinating reality. Thank you for your attention.
네, 감사합니다. 산토 선생님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santo. You are not alone. We are dreaming together, and we will be dreaming together with you. So one of the key points he elaborated on that I'd like to highlight here is that Eco Museum, well, museum, people believe that it's all about the past, but this is something about the future. But Eco Museum is there to bring about changes, so that we can realize the future we all want to have. This is a future-oriented museum, and every year I come on the day of the World Day of a Museum, but next year we will celebrate the museums for inspiration. So I think, well, this is the right direction. We are in the right direction. More than anything else, but you showed us the Barbiaga bread. I really want to have a bread with cheese. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now I'd like to turn to Mr. Sun Ju Hwang, and he will talk about Gyeonggi Province Eco Museum. I have this huge panel in front of me. So I'd like to have some chat or talk with the person who are joining me via Zoom platform. Thank you very much for joining us. In particular, I'd like to thank the team leader who is in charge of the DMZ policy in Gyeonggi Province. I'm really pleased to see him on the panel. Today, I'd like to talk about what Gyeonggi Province is doing to create Eco Museum in the Gyeonggi Province. how we are applying this concept and how we are realizing this vision. I'd like to brief you on what we have done for the past 2 to 5 years and what we are going to do. I have only 20 minutes to go, so let me start right away. What do you think a museum is? There are so many different types of museums, the world museum or religion museum. So the modern day museum would remind you of some historical site or some plunders are from formerly dominated nations. So collection would be stored in a storage, then at some point it will be exited to be displayed in an exhibition hall. But I'd like to tell you briefly about the concept and the definition of eco-museum. So I think, well, the eco-museum is also plunderous to a certain extent because eco, if you look up the dictionary, means ecology or environment or residence. But it goes beyond that. And our understanding of the term eco is rather different because it has locality, ecology, the participation of the local citizens, the practice, and the alternative for the future. So this is all-inclusive concept, not just history, citizenship, and site specificity. The most important point here in Korea about eco-museum or the race value for the eco-museum would come from site specificity or the history of that specific site or location. And I believe the most important thing in eco-museum is participation by the local residents, which is translated into citizenship. So all these aspects are intertwined and turned into the term eco-museum in Korea. There are 3 letters which can't capture the very gist of eco-museum. H stands for heritage, which is the preservation of the local heritage in the area, and utilization of that collection or the resources is the museum activity, and P, which stands for participation, which is self-initiated participation by the local residents. So we'd like to capture these basic properties of the eco-museum in the eco-museum in Gyeonggi Province. To you, what is the identity of the Gyeonggi Province? Back in 2015, we conducted a research or a survey to get an understanding of the identity of the Gyeonggi Province. So Palda Palace in Suwon area was the first thing that came to mind to the citizens of Gyeonggi Province, and the second one was DMZ, and the third is Namhan Mountain Castle. So we have made it as dedicated efforts to define the cultural identity of the Gyeonggi Province, and to us, well, this was quite natural, but at the same time, it was a little bit frustrating because we have such a diversity in terms of the cultural assets, but many things have been neglected and have not been fully captured and highlighted. Along with the DMZ, in the western part of Gyeonggi Province, we have the Gyeonggi Bay area. This has not been missed out. And this accounts for the half of the Gyeonggi Province, so this should be highlighted with due respect. And in order to deal with this problem, we decided to introduce the concept of eco-museum into Gyeonggi Province. That's the background of the eco-museum creation in Gyeonggi Province. So I'd like to first brief you on what we have done for the past 5 years. Although today's theme is DMZ, I'd like to brief you on what we have done with regard to the coastal culture related eco-museum efforts by the Gyeonggi Province in the Gyeonggi Bay area. As I told you previously, as China has emerged as G2, Gyeonggi Bay has been paid a close attention to. Especially, it is a hub connecting Eurasia and the Pacific Rim, and it's a new growth engine for the development of the national territory open to the world. All at the same time, it is the new hub for industry, logistics, and tourism. However, this Gyeonggi Bay, if you pay a visit to the area, then you can see in the process of development and exchange and interactions has suffered isolation, marginalization, as well as the tension and conflict among the local citizens. But these issues we have to tackle head on, otherwise we would not be able to ensure a balanced and healthy growth. Let me take some examples. In the top left, you can see the photos taken of the Seonggam Hagwon. This is the youth incarceration camp. Started from the Japanese colonial rule, and it was shut down only in the early 1980s. The victims have not been fully compensated for. And the top right is the Maehangni. For about 50 years since 1951, this was used as the U.S. Army bombing site. So right above this village, U.S. bombers flew while the local residents lived in that site, in that village. So the bombing exercise took place day after day after day. And at the left bottom, you can see Daechuri protest by the local citizens. And this is what happened in Pyeongtaek, which is also the hometown of famous singer Tae Chun-jung. And because of the relocation of the U.S. base, the local citizens, the indigenous people, were almost evicted. And at the right bottom, you can see the construction of seawall. The fishing villages were driven out of this place in order to build the seawall. So, as I told you, the history of isolation, marginalization, and conflict has repeated over and over again. So, in order to tackle all these problems while preserving the region and ensure sustainable development for the future, we came up with the concept of eco-museum, which is a sustainable regional development model. So as for our key activities so far in order to create an eco-museum in Gyeonggi Bay area, first of all, we conducted a research and we also have identified resources, and we have created 12 spaces for art history and regeneration. And we have created a collection so that we can fully utilize the local resources. And we also have made efforts to organize citizens' network with the participation of various organizations as well as the activists and advocates. So let me show you some images which capture what we have done so far. So this is 100 pieces for the collection and various spaces and the research projects and restoration and regeneration. This is art pavilion and art park we have created. And 70-year-old salt warehouse has been registered as a cultural heritage and cultural asset. And the citizens have been involved in various experience and participatory programs. For the past 5 years, as we have pursued this initiative and the project of Eco-Museum in Gyeonggi Bay, we have been supported by various stakeholders in the region as well as from the central and the regional government. This shows the network for the implementation of this Eco-Museum idea. Through this Eco-Museum, we'd like to include the DMZ area. Well, I believe Gyeonggi Bay has been the center of the attention thanks to this introduction of Eco-Museum. We will further develop art pieces and the resources for the collection of the Eco Museum so that we would have a richer and higher quality collection for this museum. And based on that, we'd like to expand this Eco Museum into the DMZ area. We are already making that effort since 2019. Next page, please. When you hear the term DMZ, you only think of a bordered cities. There are only 2 cities in Gyeonggi province, which share border with the north. The Gimpo, Paju, and Yeoncheon. These are the key border cities. But even though they do not share the border with the north, there are several DMZ cultural cities. So all in all, we have identified 6 cities, not just Yeoncheon and Paju, Dongducheon, Uijeongbu, Yangju, Pocheon. All these 6 cities have been designated as DMZ cultural cities because they share the history of the DMZ. So these cities will be the target of DMZ Eco Museum project. So Paju, Yeoncheon area is known for military camp town, and we have registered the trademark of this area for cultural archiving. And we have also created various village museums with unique histories. The case in point would be Dongducheon, where the military camp town is, or the Cheokgori village, Baekhangni, or club in the Paju will be turned into a village museum with their own history and story. Now, I'd like to briefly touch upon the 3 key pillars in the Eco Museum creation strategies. The first key part would be to create an eco museum, river eco museum, recognizing Hantan River and Incheon River area as ecological, cultural, and historical zone. And this DMZ area accommodates various military camp towns as well as Cold War heritage. We'd like to preserve those resources and heritage as much as possible by designating them as an eco museum area. And in Tongil Village or Daesung Village, the reclaimed or reconstructed or a privileged, preserved villages are still there in the DMZ zone. We'd like to create one big community, to accommodate all these villages as a DMZ eco community. This is the mapping of the River Eco Museum Yeoncheon. And I believe this will be available online. Incheon River and Hantan River are the key sources for the River Eco Museum, and our priority would be the water quality preservation or improvement with the participation of the citizens as well as the artistic engagement. Because of the national division, the waterways has been blocked, but the ports and the docks in Incheon River and Hantan River, we'd like to connect this into one big waterway. This would be our big vision for this River Eco Museum, and we will continue to expand our collection for the Cold War heritage as well as military camp town eco museum, and we will also continue to develop this DMZ eco community eco museum. I think the most important factor in realizing the vision and the plan of eco museum is to ensure civil participation. This is where the citizens can be the owner and the leaders. In order to realize that vision, we need to accumulate know-how through various practices and experiences. As for Dongducheon Station project, although this is a public project, in order to turn this into an eco-museum, we need an active participation on the part of the citizens and the local residents. The artistic participation as well as the cultural experience is the key to the success of the eco-museum. The value of the art and the artistic practices as well as the realization of the social values through the artistic practices would be of greatest importance. So we'd like to combine the history, culture, and art into eco-museum. And I believe that through the eco-museum, not just the Korean artists, but also the global artists have an opportunity to present their works. This would be the conclusion of my presentation, so to say. So the next session, in the next room, they are talking about the designation as the cultural heritage, UNESCO cultural heritage. Many people visit DMZ, many tourists visit the DMZ, but it's quite typical they would look into the North Korean territory, and they would visit this underground infiltration tunnel, but that's it. But more than that, they can experience the lives of the local citizens who are actually living in the DMZ. So we can offer a multifaceted tourism, not focusing solely on the treasury of the division. In that sense, the local citizens' participation is of greatest importance. In particular, irreversible impact. So here, in this outstanding universal value, the selection criteria, there are two key aspects. You can see the criteria number 5 and 6 to be an outstanding example of a traditional human settlement, land use, or sea use, which is representative of a culture or cultures or human interaction with the environment, especially when it has become vulnerable under the impact of irreversible change. And number 6, to be directly or tangibly associated with events or living traditions, with ideas or with beliefs, and so on. So I believe in registering DMZ as the UNESCO World Heritage, Eco-Museum can play a pivotal role. And in the DMZ, there are so many fort remains from the Goguryeo dynasty. So I think we can consider the idea of a local museum with the Goguryeo history, Goguryeo's historical remains. And the third key project for the eco-museum would be Jogang Cultural Zone. If we utilize this as an eco-museum, then we would be able to secure the beginning of a small reunification. So this is another idea for the eco-museum in the DMZ area. Through this process, we will be able to see the true value of eco-museum, which put an emphasis on the process, the participation by the local citizens, and the community dream for the future. This is the approach of eco-museum to our understanding. And DMZ area, through this process, although it represents the treasury of the Korean people, will develop into the most global local. In order to realize this vision, Eco-Museum and Global Gyeonggi Cultural Foundation will make its dedicated effort. Thank you very much.
DMZ는 벌써 세계적인 브랜드입니다. 우리가
DMZ is already a global brand. I don't think we need to create another global brand for the DMZ, but this is about how to utilize the DMZ and how to ensure in the process the harmony and coexistence and prosperity of the local citizens there as well. So this is such an ambitious project and initiative. Although you have gone through some ups and downs, I know you have made some time and error. I believe we are in the right direction. And this eco-museum of Gyeonggi province is focused more on the urban setting. I'm so sorry that not to give you enough time for your presentation. Now I'd like to turn to Mr. Hyun Deok-seok.
네,
Thank you very much. I'm Hyun Deok-seok, working at the Korea Rural Economic Institute. I have studied forestry for over 3 decades, and I would like to start by saying I deeply appreciated the 2 presentations. I am given 10 minutes for my discussion, so I would like to share some personal thoughts, after which I will raise questions to the 2 presenters. I would like to mainly deal with three areas. Firstly, I would like to talk about the concept of a community forest. Globally, community forests are being very well kept, regardless of the level of development of the country. And such community forests, I think, its concept is very similar to that of the Eco Museum, which is why community forests are something that Korea can benchmark for the future. So that is the first topic. And secondly, I want to ask the question of what we need to do to achieve success of our eco museums. And thirdly, I would like to talk about what the Gyeonggi province can do in this entire eco museum project. So going back to my first point of the community forest. Community forests used to exist in Korea in the past, and you can still find them in rural areas of our country. In European countries, community forests are even more active. Each local community is oftentimes surrounded by forests, and whether they are public or private, the local residents regard them as being a common good. And such community forests in European countries have existed for centuries. Oftentimes, the goal of such community forests are threefold. Number one, it is a utility, and it is used for health and recreation purposes. To this end, they try not only to preserve the forests, but also utilize the forests. For instance, if there is an area where cross-country skiing is popular, they would create scales suitable for cross-country. If horse riding is popular, then trails suitable for horse riding. And community forests are also employed to create economic benefits as well. Also for tourism purposes, also for educational purposes. For example, educating young students about forests, and people from other regions and communities can also be invited to the community forests, which also creates profits for the local community. At any rate, I think that the concept of community forest is very similar to the concept of the Eco Museum. So it starts with a single community and spreads out to many other communities, which enables people to share know-how and create networks. So such networks do exist, and forums are held. Capacity building sessions and experience sharing takes place. And when this expands even further, it goes to the national level. For example, the UK has a very powerful national level networking between England, Scotland, and Wales. They would hold national level seminars and have joint capacity building sessions. And globally, the UK, globally, actually, there are also global networks that exist for community forests. The term community forest, often also called as social forest or mother forest. There is something called the International Mother Forest Network, headquartered in Canada. And Mr. Dal Santo, what he spoke of, is very similar to this mother forest initiative. In terms of methodology and history, I find very many similarities, which is why it would be a good idea for Korean eco-museums to benchmark the cases and experiences of overseas countries. So that was an introduction so far. Next, in order to promote eco-museums, what do we have to consider? I think there are mainly three things. Firstly, the two presenters have already mentioned this, but at any rate, I think there are three main elements to this. First of all, the eco-museum website has to be very well established. Its concepts have to be powerful, and its contents as well, and it has to work in harmony with the local community. So it in itself has to be very solid. And secondly, is the importance of partnerships. All of the actions and initiatives should be community-led. That is, of course, very important. But I think we have to go one step further and create partnerships amongst stakeholders as well. So, partnership between local governments and local residents, partnerships amongst local residents is necessary, and partnerships in and between local institutions, and also between residents and users or residents and customers, and so forth and so on. If these kind of partnerships takes place, various demands will arise, and all of the endeavors will proceed very efficiently. The third component has to do with the importance of sustainability. Eco-museums cannot be a single-time thing and disappear soon into the future, which is why I emphasize sustainability along with the two presenters. I think this third component is perhaps the most important because autonomous administration and operation is very important. And in every phase of managing eco-museums, sustainability becomes extremely important. Last but not least, we're discussing eco-museums. I think it is very encouraging to see the DMZ forum create a session on the topic of eco-museums to begin with. I'm very grateful as a researcher. Okay, then, what should be Gyeonggi Province's stance on this topic of eco-museums? Gyeonggi is the largest province in South Korea, and Gyeonggi Province has very good themes, contents, and concepts for promoting eco-museums. So I hope the province does a good job of doing that, so that other cities and other local bodies would want to benchmark Gyeonggi Province's experience. And I think it would also be necessary to actively create a network on eco-museums in Korea. And thirdly, I mentioned the international network drop, right? And I hope to see Gyeonggi Province actively participate in this international network and serve as a medium. I would like to see Gyeonggi Province take the initiative and develop good themes and concepts. With that, I would like to conclude my discussion. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you. So you gave us a great food for thought. I'd like to turn to Mr. Yanak Chung. I think I'm here as a panelist because I also work for a museum. And I have been working on the designation as well as the selection of the intangible assets and the cultural heritage of Korea. Today I'd like to talk about the Eco-Museum of China because the concept was introduced first in China in 1998. So 20 years or so have passed since the first creation and establishment of Eco-Museum in China. And China has had some challenges as well as some errors in the process. And if we learn from them, we would be able to improve our idea and approach to Eco-Museum in Korea. Mr. Santo as well as Mr. Hong elaborated on the concept of the Eco-Museum. Actually, it has such a huge concept, well, the roofless museum and living museum, and a whole area can be also dubbed as an Eco-Museum. But as I listen to you, it sounds like, well, it's all about one region. But in case of China, Eco-Museum refers to ecology museum. The term ecology museum is used in lieu of Eco-Museum. And there is no particular enactment of laws or regulations in China regarding Eco-Museum, but each local authorities have their own rules and regulations to govern Eco-Museum. There is different concepts and definitions, then the cultural heritage and the tradition and ecological environment, and one village as a whole, or if there is any new form of a museum, then they are all categorized as Eco-Museum. If you delve too much into the concept of Eco-Museum of China, then it reminds us of the Fort Village or Fort Museum of Korea. There is such a concept to a certain extent. However, Hawai Village of Korea or National Fork Village in Korea do not feature any experience or educational programs. They are only there for the viewers to come and see. But in case of the Eco-Museum in China, since they capture the concept of education, they offer the participatory programs for the local resident, and the government plays the role of a counselor and a consultant, and the government budget is also extended. So there are these factors, the government sponsorship, as well as the citizens' participation and the rules and regulations for that. So there are about 20 or so eco-museums in China. In the early days, eco-museum was created in Guangzhou or Yunnan province, where ethnic minorities live. In 2005, into Guizhou province. An Eco-Museum conference was held with over 100 participants, 100 experts in this field. And this has boosted the interest in the Eco-Museum. But the thing is that in 2005, the Tano Festival of Korea was designated as the intangible assets of the world. And with this change, the Chinese government started to focus on the designation of intangible assets, and with the eager to be designated as the World Intangible Heritage, so many features have been intermingled and jumbled up. So although all these museums use the name eco-museum, there are so many similar concepts like college preservation area, the ethnic cultural preservation area, ethnic cultural village, and the folk village. All those concepts claim that they represent the eco-museum, so there is a need for the unification of the term. And sometimes eco-museum is dubbed as community museum to preserve and respect the spirit of the UNESCO designation, and outdoor museum, village museum, and so on. There are so many different types of the museum in China. There are about 4 issues which have been identified through the period of 20 years. At first, they focus on how to preserve and protect the lives of the local citizens as well as the tradition, while boosting the economic income and the economic welfare of the people. However, as eco-museum came to be run by the village and the local citizens, if it does not create any economic gains, then there is no reason and rationale for the local citizens to run the eco-museum anymore. And as a result, some of the eco-museums have not been properly managed and run. And another problem is that the participation of the local citizens. The Eco-Museum of Gyeonggi Province, I have offered a consultation, and I have conducted research into the lives of the Ansan citizens. And I once created a map for tourism for this eco-museum concept. And I also went to study and conduct research on the salt warehouse in Seoul. As I have taken part in this project, I can see how important it is to have the participation of the local citizens. However, most of the cases, the eco-museums operators are Ansan City Council, city officials, not the local citizens. So local residents do not seem to pay any attention to the operation of the local eco-museum in their neighborhood. Eco-museum is there to utilize intangible and tangible cultural assets. However, as the modern culture is assimilated, has affected the eco-museum concept to a certain extent. Sometimes the preservation of the intangible and tangible traditional assets is put on the back burner. And first of all, we need to have some laws and regulations governing this eco-museum and the cultural heritage as well. Otherwise, we cannot guarantee any proper budget and operation and quality cultural programs for eco-museum as well. As Dr. Sok mentioned, sustainability is the key. And to have sustainability, we need some laws and regulations governing this part. This is the end of my discussion. Thank you very much.
해주셨습니다. 사실은 우리가 다 오랫동안 지속해서 잘 살기 위해서 지금 이거를 하는 건데.
We are all making such endeavors for our well-being and for our progress. We often talk about imaginary communities. Oftentimes, we think about indigenous people and migrants, and we want to create identity. In the process of mapping, we often talk about past culture, but the people who have just arrived are newcomers, so this is a pretty tricky issue. We have to think about stakeholders, bring them together, have them take part in order for our goals to be achieved. A lot of things are government-led at the moment, which is why, as Dr. Jung pointed out, local residents, tend to lack a sense of ownership. And I don't think this is something confined to us only, but also applies to many other eco-museums that are progressing. I think that is why Raul Del Santo talked about how this is still an evolving thing and a work in progress. In order to secure sustainability, we need the right kind of policies in place. We need the right kind of laws and ordinances in order to move forward. So what kind is Gyeonggi province? I heard that it is in the process of creating ordinances. Can we link Mr. Raul Da Santo? If 1% uses the microphone, do we need to turn it all off? I'd like to raise a question to Mr. Santo. As Mr. Jung pointed out, we are talking about eco-museums, community museums. As you talked about your charter called eco-museums and cultural landscapes and eco-museums and community museums, is there a reason why various terms are used under the large phrase of eco-museum?
Can you hear me, Mr. Santos? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, yeah, I will
잘 들립니다.
later. Okay, yeah.
So I can't understand the question. Can you repeat, please?
Oh, he didn't understand what I said. Oh, I see. I would repeat my question because according to the 2016 Milan Cooperation Charter, Eco-Museums and Cultural Landscape, it clearly states that we eco-museums and community museums, so you use both words. Why do you separate eco-museums and community museums?
Can you hear me? I have a bad return of the audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. So I talk about community museum and museum in the same way. I think the problem is this: the core business of both of them is that they are tools for local development. So in Italy, we have both community museum and eco-museum, and they are working with people, with the communities to empower them to plan action for the local development by the good use of heritage, that is a river, the community forest, and so on. Eco-museum and the community museum try to go up on the staircase of participation to the empowerment of people. I think they are tools for this, and in Italy they are very, very useful tools.
Thank you.
Okay, I have. I'm Hyun from. Actually, I'm forestry man. Okay.
Yeah.
The first one is. Are you hear me? It's okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. Okay. Yeah. two questions will be, the first one is, I think you need a lot of money, right, in order to put on the project, right? Not only the process of the developing eco museum, but also launching the project on the site, right? Do you have any fiscal or financial assistance from the government? That is the first one. The other one is, okay, for the sustainability, okay, you have to always think about, consider the money, right? Business. So what that means is all the eco museum project involve business, or not only business but also the community utility itself. The community members are using their utility. I mean, maximize their utility, or either way, or just focusing on business itself. Understand? Do you understand? Okay, yeah.
Yes. In Italy is I think the only nation that has many laws about the museum. Every region, we have 20 regions. Every region approved laws about the museum and give financial sustain to eco museums. But it's not simple, because the situation in Italy is very, we are a lot of trouble and financial problems. So it is important that the museum can sustain itself. So, for example, my eco-museum is managed by the municipality that have a financial budget for the Parabiago Eco-Museum. And then it is important for the second question, is in Italy we have a lot of volunteers. So we have we spend a lot of time to empower people to implementation for the use of the heritage. But I show also circular economy experience, and they are. It's important that they are they can go on, they can go on inside the community, inside the stakeholders that implement this kind of circular economy, agriculture, stakeholders, bakeries, and so on.
Thank you. 정혁 선생님 질문.
예, 예.
정혁 선생님 질문.
예.
네.
And I'd like to turn to Dr. Chung. I have only one question here. The key to Eco Museum is the local authorities or the central government and the local citizens and the local residents. And you emphasize the role and the participation of the local residents in your presentation, whether it's a municipality or the local authorities. What is the role of the local authorities and the role to be played by the local residents? How would you define the roles and responsibilities of the municipalities and the local residents?
So we have So the main role of the municipality that manage a eco-museum is empower people. So this is the core business of my eco-museum. So we have a forum of participation. We had workshop to make parish maps. We have educational projects with the young people and so on. But everything we do in the eco-museum, we can involve people. So we can empower people. Our work is empower people to do something. This is the relation between the municipality that manage the eco-museum and finance eco-museum and people, local people.
Actually, we don't have enough time, but I have just one more question for you, okay? You told me Parabiago bread, okay, the good example of the success of the Eco Museum, right? But my consider is, what I'm thinking is, okay, the bread is cultivated by the conventional way, which means it's less effective way, right? That means more cost. Then what I assume is the consumers buying the bread, the Parabiago bread, should buy higher price, right, in order to make business. So do they willing to buy a higher price, paying a higher price for the Eco Museum product or whatever the heritage you have?
Yes, the price is higher, but the Eco-Museum didn't decide it. The economy was decided by stakeholders, from farmers, from bakeries, and so on. The school canteen, yes, also. Eco-Museum, our Eco-Museum doesn't do business. We just empower process of economy. And it's important to underline that we use a traditional seeds. So the circular economy is not only future, but also past tradition.
Thank you. Now we have to close our session. I think the key word is sustainability and capacity building for the community. I think it's very important. Otherwise, we cannot really succeed. And also legal support, legislative support is very important for Eco Museum to launch. And also, it has to be beneficial for the community itself, because they have to gain something, not just preserving it, they have to gain something. So we have a lot of homework to do, even though we heard a lot of good examples. And also, thank you so much for Gyeonggi Province. So I hope we can meet again and discuss more about it. Thank you so much for joining us. 감사합니다.
그럼 이것으로 계획의 관점에서 로컬 에코뮤지엄의 네트워킹과
This concludes the networking multiple local eco-museums around DMZ on the angle of planning session. I hope this session serves as an opportunity for us to overcome the national crisis caused by the COVID-19 and open a new chapter in the inter-Korean relations. Once again, I'd like to thank all the presenters and the panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you.